Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a global geopolitical video concerning something else to get worried about. Because, do you know what? The war in Ukraine isn't enough. Israel, Gaza isn't enough. Potential huge strikes on Iran with a three-way between Iran, the US and Israel isn't enough. The growing sense of threat on Taiwan from China isn't enough, but we are going to stay on China. I'm going to, if many of you will know about this, but if you don't know about it, I'm going to alert you to the new worry of the Maritime Militia that is operating out of China. So it's got its own Wikipedia page. The Chinese Maritime Militia, CMM, also called the People's Armed Force Maritime Militia, or Fishery Militia, is a naval militia of the People's Republic of China. It's the smallest of the three maritime forces used in Chinese sea patrol operations, next to the China Coast Guard and the People's Liberation Army Navy. The Maritime Militia takes part in anti-access and area denial missions in areas of the Pacific Ocean claimed by China. By using law enforcement and, scare quotes, civilian fishing vessels, the PRC is able to use grey zone tactics, avoiding a military conflict while still pursuing and enforcing its maritime claims. Okay, so you can go and find out more about there and what they do. I just want to show you the latest taking place in around South America. But before we get there, let's just give you a little bit more context. And Michael Turner here on Twitter says, China's fishing militia is a shadowy armada whose existence Beijing rarely acknowledges, and that Beijing has long used to help hold or take disputed territory it says it owns in the region. The militia played a key role annexing Scarborough Shoal in 2012. So this is Scarborough Shoal. This was going back to January this year. The monster 12,000-ton China Coast Guard 5901 arrived at Scarborough Shoal on January the 1st, joining all these other ships and at least 7 militia ships, further boosting China's control over this important fishing ground just 120 nautical miles from the Philippines coast. Now, there's been this war essentially going on between China and the Philippines. The Philippines ships have been rammed by Chinese Coast Guard. Coast Guards are the Coast Guard ships, like the one you can see in the top right of the picture. I'm pretty sure that's a Chinese Coast Guard ship. They are essentially not your nice Coast Guards that's going to save people from drowning in the water. These are more military vessels, and they've been throwing heavy water cannon jets at Filipino fishermen, and have been sort of involved in ramming boats and whatnot. So anyway, Michael Turner was saying that the maritime militia has existed for decades, but has become more professional, better equipped, and more militarized under the leadership of President Xi Jinping, who has overhauled China's armed forces since taking power in 2012. The crew on these militia boats are believed to be civilian fishers and sailors, as well as ex-military personnel recruited through a Chinese government training program. Militia are primarily funded through various subsidies, and some personnel receive full-time salaries. Essentially, they're strip mining the oceans for fish or of fish. So let's have a little bit more of a look here. Michael Turner again says, firing on fishing boats may look harsh, but the boats at which the Indonesian Navy fired are not ordinary fishing boats. They were part of China's fishing militia. So this is a BBC report that Indonesian Navy has fired on Chinese fishing boats in disputed waters. Fishing militia, says Turner, is tasked to extend China's dominance by resorting to grey zone operations. And those grey zone operations, exist in that grey zone. Think of the frontline updates I do for the Ukraine war, the areas between the formerly defended Ukrainian positions and formerly defended Russian positions, that bit in between that no one's quite sure who controls that. It's a bit like these fishing waters, where they kind of try and wrest control of these areas for their own benefit. Now, the militia vessels have become a common sight in the exclusive economic zones of Vietnam, EEZs, Vietnam, Philippines and Indonesia. The fishing militia helps Chinese Navy and China Coast Guard by engaging and blocking the Coast Guard and naval vessels of China's neighbouring countries. So these are like your vanguard ships, if you like. Now, here we have, going back to, I think, the end of May, was it? yes, so the end of May, Argentina shot a Chinese fishing boat at the end of May. 3 years ago, we exposed, says investigative journalism Reportica, Chinese fishing vessels operating as a militia, overfishing in other countries' EEZs, attacking vessels or conducting reconnaissance activities. They spent over 600,000 hours in the Argentinian EEZ as per our findings. So here is a bit of a news bit.
Nuevamente, avisándole que vamos a tirarle a las antenas. A las antenas, fuego libre. Alto el fuego.
Detenga sus máquinas ahora o continuará recibiendo más fuego directo.
So this is the southern coast of Patagonia.
Fishing vessel Xinchuan 626. This is Argentine Coast Guard vessel Mantilla. You're responsible for the safety of your crew and your ship.
Alto el fuego, confirmo el barco. Fuego libre.
So shots across the bow of the ships there, but essentially allowed to escape in the end, and nothing's essentially done about it. Now, this is what I wanted. It's this little snippet I wanted to show you to give you a sense of how powerful this militia is becoming and how huge these flotillas are, and think not just in terms of an assault on other nations' economic zones, but this is an ecocide of fish. So this is, well, the preface to this is Chinese fishing vessels have become a global menace. They are everywhere, depleting fishing resources in almost every coastal nation. Poor nations in Africa and South America are worst hit to the extent that they are now facing a threat to their food security. Chinese fishing vessels have been spotted in far off remote places like the Galapagos Islands, Drake Passage, etc. China's deployment to this remote expanse is no accident. Decades of overfishing have pushed its overseas fleet, the world's largest ever farther from home. Officially capped at 3,000 vessels, the fleet might actually consist of thousands more. Keeping such a sizable flotilla at sea, sometimes for years at a time, is at once a technical feat made possible through billions in state subsidies. Chinese fishing vessels are not only depleting fishing resources, they are also posing threats to the lives of local coastal communities. Chinese vessels are known for deliberately hitting small civilian boats. They don't even hesitate to clash with coast guards when challenged. And we're just going to see this DW snippet here.
They look like city lights on the horizon, but this is an armada of fishing vessels harvesting squid off South America to feed China's enormous appetite for seafood, and, as investigations suggest, with little regard for the environment, workers' rights, or international law.
2/3 of the world's oceans are the high seas. The high seas are like the Wild West. They're largely ungoverned. There's no one country that's responsible for enforcement out there.
The Chinese vessels show signs of fishy business, sailing with their mandatory transponders turned off, broadcasting multiple electronic IDs, or transmitting false information. Once again, the Chinese ships have crossed the Pacific. Last year, they sailed to the rich fishing grounds around the Galapagos Islands. Because of overfishing closer to home, they have to venture far and in huge numbers.
Last year, what we saw when you had the 350 Chinese fishing vessels off the coast of the Galapagos Islands, it was really a wake-up call for the region. You're seeing increasingly vessels travel further and come to this hemisphere to find those fish.
As a result, South America's own Pacific Ocean fishermen are suffering. We are being overwhelmed by the foreign boats right next to where we work, because there's no maritime control, no maritime authority that defends us. There's also no one to defend the crews aboard the Chinese vessels. The next day, the team returns with a megaphone.
You're right.
So on and so forth. So it cuts off there, but absolutely fascinating stuff. This, but fascinating in a bad way. here we have a view of these fishing vessels from the air. This is someone in an airplane looking down on these Chinese fishing vessels. Just incredible numbers of vessels lighting up the sea there. And this is, one presumes, going over the sea near South America. That's what the person is showing you on their map there. So I think that's the west coast of South America there. Quite incredible. Hundreds of Chinese fishing vessels fishing boats are seen swarming Peru's national waters near Mollendo. To avoid detection, these boats have their transponders switched off. Small-sized Peruvian Navy and Coast Guards can't handle the menace of China's fishing militia alone. You know, what do you do about this? Chinese fishing militia is not just a problem in the South China Sea, but all across the world. South America is one of the worst hit regions. Nations like Argentina, Ecuador, and Paraguay have raised the issue of intrusive Chinese distant water fishing several times, but to no avail. Chinese distant water fishing fleet is not just emptying oceans all over the world, but they are also eroding the sovereignty of the coastal nations situated far away from China. This has to end, says Isabella Anderson. And here we have a bit of an image to give you a sense of what's going on there. The reason that Africa's megafauna, namely elephants and rhinos, is being driven to near extinction is that the East Asians are prolific poachers who have no care for or thought of the natural environment of the all the animals in it. Similarly, vast Chinese fishing fleets are sweeping over the ocean like a fleet-sized vacuum cleaner, leaving it utterly denuded of life. The most just casus bellum currently in existence is how they're doing their best to leave the world devoid of wildlife and should be destroyed before they can do so. So yeah, you know, harsh words there about what these guys are actually up to. This is the sort of situation that shows why we really must have tougher trade policies with the PRC. Not only do they need to face consequences now, but they'll need to be chastised at some point, and so economic independence from them is critical. So you can factor that into the trade war with them between the US, but I don't think this is featured whatsoever. And they're just, you know, coming in to absolutely hoover up all of the life that's in the ocean in these places. And it gives you some idea of what they're doing there, and the species that are illegally or accidentally caught as these huge fishing vessels just go and suck up everything they possibly can. And then here's an example of electrofishing. So this is the aftermath of China's electrofishing off Iran. Chinese distant water fishing vessels leave behind a trail of destruction wherever they go. It's not that the Chinese don't understand environmental conservation principles. It's a tactic. This is political war fought subtly. And here you see the, you know, heartbreaking death of all these fish that are electrocuted. They use some kind of electrocution methods, killing all the fish in the water around, and then they leave all sorts there, you know, unused. It's just such a trail of destruction. Again, absolutely environmentally heartbreaking. But this is another issue that we'll have to contend with, because this is a militia. This is a form of, you know, form of war, really. This is a maritime war that they are waging on many countries that are neighboring, but also countries that are very far away from them, such as in South America. You know, what do we do about this? What happens? I don't know. I don't know enough about this subject, but I thought this would be another opportunity to scare you with the gut. I'm not trying to scare you, but I mean, this is the world we live in. When you have that many people on the planet, all trying to eat more and more meat and fish, and as more and more the world is lifted out of poverty, or aspire to eat. I remember learning at university that I've got a book there, Green Political Thought, Andrew Dobson, I think it was. But what was one of the stats then? And this is from like decades ago. It was like, if the world was to eat food eat meat at the levels that the US eats meat, then we would need 73 other worlds. Like, you might have to fact check that, but you get the point, is that the world literally cannot sustain that amount of people eating that amount of protein, that amount of meat and fish. So something has to give. And at the moment, what's giving is the wildlife, right? So we are just destroying the ecosystems. But at some point, there'll be a critical, there'll be a tipping point that we'll reach. And, you know, it would be nice if we were proactive and did something about that up front. But at the moment, you know, you can see that a country of 1 billion people wanting to feed itself is going around the world, hoovering up the oceans, and also using this fishing militia, not just as a way to get natural resources, the fish, but also a way to project power as well into the oceans territorially, and I think this is something that's very, very worrying. Anyway, that was a Chinese fishing fleet in 2020, and we're now in 2025. Anyway, let me know what you think. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.